My brother laughed that I wasn't successful enough until the bank told him who his new landlord was. I was at Dad's 60th birthday when Ethan said it. He stood on the little stage with a drink, smiling like he owned every room. "Still working that tiny job," he said loud enough for relatives to hear. People laughed. My mother looked down, embarrassed. I felt my cheeks burn. I smiled and said, "I'm happy where I am," but my voice shook. Inside, I was burning. I had carried a box with Dad's old photos and a small handmade gift I made that morning. Ethan had given Dad a watch that cost more than my rent. He leaned close and whispered, "You'll never be like me." The words landed like a slap. I backed away, heart thudding. I saw Dad's smile fade into worry. I wanted to scream then. Instead, I stood in the kitchen doorway and watched Ethan charm the crowd. That night the sting stayed with me. I went home and opened a notebook I kept under my bed. It was labeled Project Phoenix. I wrote 3 words at the top, "Not anymore." If you like this kind of true revenge story, hit subscribe for more. I had heard the comparison my whole life. At family dinners, Ethan listed his newest purchase. 3 properties and counting, he said once, chest puffed. I sat with my quiet soup and gave him a small nod. I had left a steady job years ago to freelance. I made small things by hand and helped a few clients. Ethan made a show of wealth. He wanted everyone to know he won. He showed off his new watch and his new friends. He whispered to Dad that I should try harder. My gift for Dad was simple, a photo album I had restored and a folded hand-stitched napkin. I watched Ethan slip a tiny velvet box into Dad's hand. He kissed Dad's cheek like he was the son of the year. Later, when guests left, Mom touched my shoulder and said, "You are kind, Nora." Her eyes were sad. I smiled, but I felt small. That night I sat alone and thought, they can laugh now, but laughter can change. I opened the notebook and wrote, "Learn. Plan. Wait." Days later, my biggest client canceled a contract. I had counted on that money. My rent was due and I felt the cold fear again. I called and begged for more time. The client said the company was cutting costs, and they could not pay me. I listened and held the phone like it might break. I had been broke before, and I knew the rhythm of worry. On my walk home, I saw Ethan's post about a new penthouse. He wrote, "Finally upgraded. Living the dream." People liked the post and left hearts. I wanted to throw my phone. I stopped at a bench and stared at the city lights. I had been careful with my money, but freelance work came in fits and starts. I had saved a little, but not enough for the shock of a lost contract. My stomach turned. I thought of Dad's watch and of the way Ethan had said I'd never catch up. I sat on the bench and opened my notebook. Under the heading Project Phoenix, I wrote, "Start small. Start smart. Hide my moves." I went to family dinner that week because I could not avoid them. Ethan raised his glass and said, "To real success stories. Maybe Nora will join us one day." People chuckled. I felt my throat tighten. I excused myself and walked to the bathroom. My hands were wet with tears when I ran water. I looked at my face in the mirror and practiced a calm mouth. I told myself I was not a joke. At the table, I pretended everything was fine, ate slowly, and smiled when they told stories. After dinner, I walked home in the dark. My apartment was small, but it was mine. I sat at my little table and pulled out old tax papers and notes from classes I had taken in investment analytics years before. I had once helped manage portfolios for a small firm. Then Ethan had taken credit for work I did, and I'd been let go. The memory hurt, but it also lit something cold inside me. I whispered into the quiet room, "I'm done being the joke." I opened the notebook and drew a line. This was where it changed. At midnight, I sat with my lamp on and a pen in my hand. I had been quiet for years, pretending to be content. But I had a skill I had not used. I knew numbers in buildings and how money moved through them. I had studied real estate analytics and once helped flip properties. I had kept the knowledge in my head like a seed. Now I fed it with sleep-deprived study. I wrote plans in my notebook, a step-by-step to rebuild my life. I called an old mentor, Mr. Patel, whose number I had kept from a summer internship long ago. He answered with a surprised, warm voice. I told him I wanted work and could handle distressed properties. He laughed softly and said, "You always had the eye, Nora. Prove it." He told me about small buildings with problems and low prices. I felt a flicker of hope. I knew this would take time and quiet. I would not scream about it. I would build. In the dark, I wrote the name Havenstone Holdings at the top of a new page and then closed the notebook. I slept for a few hours with a plan in my mind. Mr. Patel sent me files the next morning. They were messy papers about broken buildings in bad shape. Most people would run from them. But I saw numbers the way some people saw colors. I saw the good parts under the dirt. If you flip one well, you keep half the profit, he told me. My chest felt tight with excitement and fear. I walked through the first duplex that afternoon. The walls were cracked and the floors buckled, but I saw space and light and a chance. I spent weeks fixing it. I stayed up late, reading guides, calling contractors, and learning what I had forgotten. I painted walls myself and cleaned rooms until my fingers hurt. When we listed it, people wanted it right away. I sold it for far more than we spent. My share was $80,000. I looked at the check for a long time, quiet and shaking. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell Ethan. I only wrote in my notebook, Step 1 complete. Then I sat in my dark apartment and let myself smile. I moved fast. I took the profit from the duplex and bought 2 more small buildings through a shell company. I named each one something simple, like Stonebird LLC or Havenstone 3. I didn't want anyone knowing the owner. I worked all day and night. I drank cheap coffee and lived on noodles. But every month, the buildings brought in more money. I hired a cleaner and a handyman and treated them well. They were loyal because I paid on time, unlike many landlords. My network grew. Tenants liked me, even though they never met me. They said Havenstone Holdings was fair. I felt something I hadn't felt in years, steady. One night, while going through files, I realized some of Ethan's friends were living in buildings I owned. The thought made me laugh a little. They had no idea. I kept growing. I stayed quiet. I learned the market. And every night I wrote in my notebook, build under the surface. Stay calm. Stay hidden. The seed inside me grew roots. By summer, I had 5 properties. They were small, but they were mine. I reinvested every dollar and rarely bought anything for myself. I still lived in my little apartment with a loose window latch and noisy pipes. But inside, I felt richer than Ethan ever made me feel. I learned how loans worked, how interest hit, how banks judged risk. I learned how to choose buildings before they were listed. I kept my calls with Mr. Patel short. He told me I had a sharp eye. I liked hearing that. I had not heard praise in years. One day, after signing papers for a new triplex, I walked out of the bank and saw a fancy black car drive by. Ethan was inside, laughing with someone. I stepped back, so he wouldn't see me. He waved to a group of business people on the sidewalk. They all knew him. None of them knew I owned 3 buildings on that same street. I whispered to myself, one day you'll see me. Then I walked home with my folder full of secret wins. Thanksgiving came, and I decided to go even though I dreaded it. I wore a simple dress. Ethan walked in late, wearing a bright suit and talking loudly into his phone about a deal. He sat down and said, just bought another building downtown. People clapped. Mom sighed softly, wishing he would be humble. I said nothing, though I knew something he didn't. The bank he used sometimes borrowed money from private lenders. One of those lenders was one of my companies. In a way, Ethan was already tied to me. The idea made my stomach flutter, but I kept my face calm. During dinner, Ethan bragged about rent prices and how he played the market. I watched him carefully. He knew only the surface of real estate, the shiny parts. He never learned the bones of it. He never learned the things I studied at midnight. When dinner ended, he clapped my shoulder and said, don't worry, Nora. You'll find something one day. I smiled and whispered inside, I already have. I went home and wrote, patience is part of the build. My business grew quietly until one morning Mr. Patel called me into a private meeting at a cafe. He leaned in and said, you're ready for bigger things. He slid a folder toward me. Inside were details about a large apartment block coming off market. My breath caught. I saw pictures of the building. I saw numbers. They were beautiful to me. Then I flipped the last page and froze. Ethan's name sat at the top. He owned it, but barely. His loan was too big. His payments were late. The building was close to foreclosure. My heart beat so hard I felt my fingers go cold. You know him? Mr. Patel asked. Yes, I said softly. I kept my face still. But inside, a spark lit. This moment felt like a turning point, like opening a door to a room I had once been locked out of. I closed the folder and held it tight. I whispered, this is it. Then I walked out into the cold air and felt something I hadn't felt since childhood. Power. I took the folder home and spread the papers across my table. Ethan's apartment block looked strong on the outside, but the numbers told a different story. He had borrowed too much. His interest rate had climbed. His tenants had complained about repairs he never handled. He was slipping. I read every line until I knew the building better than he ever did. The next morning I met with a major property investor, a man named Rivera. He reviewed my work with quiet interest. You understand things most investors miss, he said. Then he told me something that made my heart race. If this building goes into foreclosure, you could get it at a price far below value. He smiled. You would also gain leverage. I nodded, pretending to stay calm. But inside, I felt a wave of heat. I didn't want to hurt Ethan at first. I only wanted him to stop laughing at me. But now the chance was here. I left the meeting feeling like the world had opened for me. When I got home, I whispered, "You mocked me. Now your numbers belong to me." A week later, I confirmed everything. Ethan wasn't just slipping, he was sinking fast. He missed another payment. His lender started moving toward foreclosure. I sat on my couch holding the papers and shaking a little. My brother, who called me small, was about to lose something huge. And I had the chance to take it. I paced the room, thinking of all the times he mocked me. The birthday party. The dinner toast. The quiet jabs. The years he acted like I was useless. Then I looked at the numbers again. "This is the moment," I whispered. I felt fear and fire mixing inside me. Could I really do this? Could I take his building? I sat down and closed my eyes. I remembered how he took credit for my work and cost me my job. I remembered the nights I cried, feeling like I had failed. Then I opened my eyes. "Yes," I said out loud. "This is mine to take." For the first time in years, my hands did not shake from weakness, they shook from power. I created a new shell LLC, Havenstone 12, and sent an anonymous bid for the foreclosed building. I wrote every detail with steady hands. No one knew the buyer's real name. I reviewed the files again and again. Then I submitted the bid and waited. The days felt long. I barely slept. I kept checking my email, my phone, my files. One evening, when rain tapped hard against my window, I finally saw the message. I won. My offer had been chosen. The building, Ethan's building, belonged to me now. I sat still for a long time. I wasn't excited the way I thought I'd be. I felt something deeper, heavier. A shift. A line in my life had moved. I whispered, "I'm your landlord now, Ethan." Then I laughed quietly. The sound surprised me. I walked to my small kitchen and poured myself a glass of juice like it was champagne. I held it up to the dark window. "To new beginnings," I said softly. I knew the storm would come soon, but I didn't care. I had earned this. If you're hooked so far, hit subscribe for more true revenge stories. The next morning, Ethan called me. His voice shook with anger. "Some vulture investor stole my building," he snapped. "Do you know anything about Havenstone something? Some group I never heard of?" I pressed the phone to my ear and smiled at my wall. "No," I said gently, "but I'm sorry you're dealing with that. The market is tough." He cursed under his breath. "I worked so hard for that building. This shouldn't be happening." I made soft noises like I cared. "I hope it works out," I said. "Maybe things will turn around." He kept talking, but I barely heard him. I studied the contract sitting on my table. His name was still printed at the top of the old documents, but mine stood on the new ones. When the call ended, I let out a slow breath. I felt steady, almost calm. This was only the first strike. I closed my notebook and wrote, "Phase 2 begins." Then I put my phone face down and enjoyed the silence he left behind. A week later, official notices went out to every tenant in the building, including Ethan. I sat on my bed holding the letter addressed to penthouse resident Ethan Clark. The words were simple. The property now had new ownership and new management. I mailed it with steady hands. That night I pictured Ethan opening the envelope. I pictured his face twisting with confusion. It made my chest feel warm. When the tenants started posting online about the change, Ethan panicked. He went to the bank and demanded answers. Later that day, he called me again. "The bank says Havenstone Holdings owns the building." "Who are they?" he said. I let my voice stay calm. "Sounds like a strong company," I said. "Maybe it'll be good for the building." He huffed. "This is a disaster." When the call ended, I leaned back and let myself smile for real. The first domino had fallen, and I knew more were coming. Ethan stormed into the bank the next morning, and even though I wasn't there, I heard everything from a friend who worked in the loan office. He slammed his hand on the counter and demanded, "Who owns my building now?" The banker, Mr. Doyle, stayed calm. "Havenstone Holdings LLC, he said. "They purchased the property during foreclosure." Ethan's voice cracked. "That can't be right. Someone must have cheated the system." But Mr. Doyle only shook his head. It all followed proper procedure. Ethan asked again who Havenstone was. "A powerful group," the banker said. "Growing fast. Very strategic." When I heard that later, I felt a thrill run through me. Strategic. Yes, that was the word. That night I sat in my kitchen, the room dim and quiet, and stared at my notebook. The pages were full of scribbles, arrows, numbers, and plans. All of it was finally moving. I whispered, "You wanted to laugh at me forever. Now you're losing piece by piece." And I hadn't even shown my face yet. I bought a small bottle of champagne that night. It wasn't expensive, but it felt special. I turned out the lights and stood by my window, looking at the city underneath me. When I opened the bottle, the soft pop sounded like a small victory drum. I poured a glass and held it up. For once, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the quiet sister in the corner. I felt strong in a way I had never felt before. My city, once too big for me, now felt like something I could shape. I whispered, "Now you'll learn who I really am." I imagined Ethan pacing his penthouse, calling people, trying to understand what had happened. He had no idea I was behind it. I liked that. Power felt quiet, not loud. It felt steady, not showy. I sipped the drink and wrote in my notebook, "Keep the mask on." Not yet. Timing matters. And as I closed the blinds, I felt ready for the next move. A week later we had another family gathering, this time for Mom's birthday. Ethan walked in wearing a bright blue suit and acted like he was winning again. "Already rebounding," he said loudly. "New deals. New investors. Bigger things coming." I just nodded and ate my salad. He really thought he was safe. Dad asked me quietly how my little projects were going. I said they were fine. Ethan smirked. Little projects. Cute. I bit the inside of my cheek to stop from laughing. Because while he bragged, Havenstone 14, another one of my shell LLCs, was finalizing the paperwork to buy a loan that had his name on it. He didn't know the building was sinking. He didn't know his numbers were slipping through his fingers. And he didn't know the person tightening the rope was sitting right across from him, cutting her steak slowly. For the rest of dinner he bragged about rent prices and his social life. I kept nodding. But inside I whispered, "Keep talking. I'm taking everything you think you earned." 2 weeks later it happened. Ethan's second building, his so-called crown jewel, defaulted. He had stretched the loan too far. The bank had warned him, but he ignored them. When it went on sale, I was ready. Havenstone 18 purchased it with clean, perfect paperwork. I checked the email 3 times before I believed it. I now own 2 of his buildings. I sat on my couch with my knees pulled to my chest and laughed softly. Not a loud laugh. A quiet, amazed one. I had never imagined this when he mocked me at Dad's party. I had never imagined the girl with no money and a canceled contract would reach this point. I texted Mr. Patel a simple message. Second one secured. He replied with a thumbs up and wrote, "Your work is impressive. You could run the city one day." I stared at his words for a long time. Maybe I could. Maybe I would. I closed my eyes and thought, "You took from me once. Now the ground under your feet belongs to me." Mr. Patel called me that night. His voice was warm but serious. "You've done well, Nora. Very well. But maybe it's time to think bigger." I asked what he meant. He said, "Sooner or later, you may need your name on something. Publicly." I froze. The idea felt bold. Scary. Real. "Not yet," I said. "The timing has to be perfect." He chuckled softly. "I trust your timing." After the call, I sat at my desk and flipped through my notebook. All the steps I had written were lining up. But the big reveal, the moment Ethan would see the truth, would need to land at the perfect time. Not now. Later. When he least expected it. When it would change everything. I touched the page where I'd written the word Phoenix months ago. Rising. Quiet. Patient. Ready. Then I wrote the next step. Prepare for the fall. His fall. My rise. The story wasn't finished. It was about to get louder. Ethan hosted a big summer barbecue at his penthouse. He wanted everyone to see he was still on top. I went because Mom begged me. When I stepped onto the rooftop, the first thing I noticed was how many people there were, laughing, drinking, bragging. The second thing I noticed was how many of them rented from me. Half the crowd lived in Havenstone buildings. They didn't know their quiet landlord was standing right beside the grill. Ethan walked up with that smug grin. "Still in your tiny apartment?" he asked. "You should have learned from me." I just looked around the rooftop. I saw 3 tenants from Building 12, 2 from Building 18, even one from the duplex I first flipped. They were smiling and enjoying the party, and they were paying me every month. Ethan kept talking about deals and money. His voice was loud, too loud. It tried too hard. I said nothing. I only thought, "You throw parties in buildings I own now. You brag on floors held up by my paperwork. And soon you'll see the truth." The next week the bank called Ethan in for a meeting. He walked in smiling, thinking they were renewing his terms. But the banker, Mr. Doyle, didn't smile back. "Your mortgage has been transferred," he said. Ethan blinked. "Transferred? To who?" Mr. Doyle folded his hands. "To a new ownership entity. They now control the building outright." Ethan looked confused. "But I own the building." "You did," the banker answered. "But Havenstone Holdings purchased the full loan package." Ethan's face went pale. "They own my building." Mr. Doyle nodded. They are extremely well funded. They've been buying properties all over the city. I heard later that Ethan just sat there, staring at the wall. He had thought he was a giant. He thought he ran the city, but the ground was shifting under him, and he had no idea I was the one moving it. That night I sat at my desk and whispered, "The walls are closing, brother." And I built them myself. Ethan tried to act normal for a few days. He posted photos online, pretending nothing was wrong. But panic showed in the small cracks. Late-night calls to lenders, messages begging old partners for help, emails sent at 2 a.m. Then it happened. He received the official transfer notice, the one stating the new owner had full control over terms. My company, my signature. His hands shook so badly he had to sit down. My friend at the bank told me, he whispered, "My landlord owns me?" He wasn't wrong. I had gone from the sister he mocked to the silent force that controlled everything he cared about. I imagined him staring at the paper, reading my company's name again and again. I imagined the slow realization spreading across his face. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Nothing in my life had ever felt this clear. Not fear. Not pain. Just a sharp, steady feeling. Now the game was mine. 2 days later, Ethan got the letter. The one I knew would hit him hardest. I sat at my dining table as I signed each copy. Please vacate within 60 days, due to restructuring. The letters were firm and polite, but final. When he opened his, he yelled so loudly the neighbor heard. He called me immediately. "Nora, I got an eviction notice. From the new owner. From Havenstone. Do you know anything about this?" I let a tiny smile tug at my mouth. "I've heard Havenstone is strict," I said. "Maybe you should talk to them." "Talk to them? They won't answer my calls," he shouted. I kept my tone soft. "I'm sure you'll figure it out." After the call, I placed the letters in a neat stack and held the top one for a long time. I whispered, "You pushed me down for years. Now stand up on your own." My hand didn't shake once. That evening, just as I was making tea, Ethan banged on my door. Hard. I opened it slowly. His face was red, eyes wild, hair messy like he had been pulling it. "You ruined me," he shouted. I stepped aside and let him in. I stayed calm while he paced my small living room. "Someone stole my buildings. Someone is kicking me out of my own penthouse. Someone." He stopped and looked at me, breathing hard. I poured tea into 2 cups. "Sit," I said. He dropped onto the couch. I handed him a cup. "Ethan," I said softly, "I didn't ruin you. You laughed while I built." He frowned. "What does that mean?" I walked to my desk, picked up one paper, and handed it to him. His eyes scanned the bottom line. He froze. He saw my name. Nora Clark, CEO, Havenstone Holdings. He looked up at me like the world had tilted, and the real revenge had finally begun. Ethan stared at the paper like it was written in fire. "You," he whispered. "You own Havenstone." I nodded. His mouth opened and closed like he couldn't breathe. Just then, the front door behind him cracked open. Our parents had stopped by after calling me earlier. They stepped inside and froze when they saw Ethan's face. Dad asked, "What's going on?" Ethan pointed at me with shaking hands. She owns my buildings. She took everything." His voice shook with panic. Mom's eyes widened as she turned toward me. I didn't look away. "I bought the buildings legally," I said. "He lost them because he didn't pay his loans." Dad sat down slowly, shock all over his face. "Nora, all this time you were the one building Havenstone." I nodded again. Ethan kept muttering, No, you were nothing." I held up my hand. "I wasn't nothing. You just never saw me." "That's different." The room went silent. Mom whispered, "Ethan, you mocked her while she was becoming stronger than you." Ethan dropped his head into his hands. I felt no guilt, only truth. The fallout began the next morning. Ethan's investors backed out after hearing about the foreclosures. They didn't trust him anymore. Some even called me, carefully, politely, to ask if I planned on buying more of his properties. I said nothing, of course. Soon rumors spread through the real estate circle that Ethan had lost control of his finances. People whispered behind his back. His credit score dropped. His business partner left. He sold his luxury car to cover old debts. But even that wasn't enough. His home, the big one he always bragged about, was tied to a loan connected to a portfolio that Havenstone now partly owned. I didn't touch the house yet. I didn't need to. He knew I could, and that was enough to make him unravel. I watched from a quiet distance as he tried to save his reputation. But he couldn't. Not when every step he took sank deeper into the mess he created. The city he once bragged he ruled had already moved on from him. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I only watched him learn the cost of pride. A week later, Ethan showed up again. This time he didn't yell. He didn't bang on my door. He stood there small, shoulders bent. Please, he said. Just let me stay in the penthouse. I'll pay rent. I'll do anything. I studied his face. The same brother who once laughed at my small dreams now begged me not to throw him out. You said I'd never be successful, I reminded him. His eyes dropped. I was wrong. I let the words hang in the air. Success isn't loud, Ethan. It's steady. It grows in silence. He swallowed hard. Please, he said again. I sighed and stepped back. You will pay rent. Full price. On time. Every month. And you will follow every rule like any other tenant. He nodded fast. Too fast. Of course. Thank you. Thank you. I handed him the official lease papers. He stared at my signature at the bottom. His hands shook. As he walked away, I whispered, You wanted me to learn from you. Now you'll learn from me. And the power shift settled like a final lock clicking shut. A month later, the story began to spread. A business magazine released a full-page article titled, The Silent Investor Behind Downtown's Big Takeover. My picture sat on the page, smiling in a navy blue suit. They wrote about my flips, my smart buying, my shell companies, and the surprise rise of Havenstone Holdings. Ethan saw it at a grocery store checkout. He told me later his knees almost gave out. How didn't I know? He whispered over the phone that night. You never looked, I said simply. You were too busy staring at yourself. Online, people share the article everywhere. Old classmates reached out. Investors wanted meetings. Even the bank called to congratulate me. Ethan, meanwhile, had to stand in line at an apartment office run by my company to file maintenance forms like a normal tenant. Each time someone recognized him from his old bragging days, he shrank a little. And for the first time, he finally understood something. While he tried to shine, I learned how to build the lights. When I bought into the bank partnership network, it wasn't supposed to be part of my revenge. It was just business. But then I learned something shocking. The bank that handled Ethan's accounts, every savings account, every loan, every credit line, was partly owned by the same investment group that funded me. Which meant that, through my network, I now owned a chunk of the very bank that controlled Ethan's money. When I heard the news, I just sat there in silence. I didn't laugh. I didn't cheer. I only felt a slow wave of completion settle over me. Ethan once said I would never catch up. But I didn't catch up, I passed him. Quietly. Deeply. Fully. That night, I wrote one sentence in my notebook. I own the ground he stands on. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was simple. He built a tower of pride. I own the land beneath it. A week after the article came out, Ethan walked into my new office. He didn't storm in like before. He knocked, waited, and kept his head low. Nora, can we talk? He asked. I nodded and told him to sit. He looked around the office. Glass walls, bright plants, quiet power. He swallowed hard. I never realized how much I hurt you, he said. His voice shook. I didn't think you cared about success. I thought you were fine being small. I leaned back in my chair. I wasn't small, I said. You just never looked close enough to see me. He nodded slowly, shame covering his face. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know my words cut like that. I watched him for a long moment. The old anger inside me softened just a little. Not gone, but changed. It's not about hurt anymore, I said. It's about respect. Something you forgot to give. He nodded again, tighter this time. Then teach me, he said. Teach me how to start over. I took a slow breath and saw the chance to rewrite everything. I leaned forward. If you want to rebuild, I said, you'll do it the right way. No bragging. No shortcuts. No looking down on anyone. He nodded fast. Whatever you say. I slid a contract across the table. You work for me. Full time. Standard pay. Standard rules. No special treatment. He froze. Work for you. I held his stare. Yes. Learn what you never took seriously. Learn the numbers. Learn the quiet work behind success. He swallowed. His pride was fighting, but it was losing. Deal, he finally said. I signed the paper and pointed to the pen. His hand shook as he signed under mine. When he looked up, I said, Your first task is simple. You listen. You study. You stop pretending you know everything. He nodded again, eyes lowered. As he left my office, walking slowly like someone learning how to breathe again, I felt something shift inside me. The revenge wasn't about crushing him anymore. It was about showing him who I had always been, and letting him finally see it. Ethan's first day at Havenstone was quiet and awkward. I walked past his cubicle. Yes, a cubicle, not an office, and watched him struggle to organize simple reports. Years ago, he called me slow. Now he learned how hard the work really was. My staff didn't treat him like a former big shot. They treated him like any new worker. He answered phones, double-checked numbers, and filed documents. And every time I walked by, he lowered his eyes and said, "Good morning, Nora," with a soft, humbled voice. One afternoon I saw him helping a junior employee carry boxes. The old Ethan would have bragged about being above that, but this Ethan said, "Let me take some weight off your hands." I paused outside my office and watched him. He didn't know I was there. He was changing, not because I broke him, but because he realized the world didn't know him respect. He had to earn it. That night, as I locked up the office, I wrote in my notebook, "Revenge teaches lessons. Redemption teaches better ones." Months passed. Havenstone grew fast, faster than I expected. Investors lined up, wanting to learn from me. I spoke at meetings. I reviewed big deals. I walked across properties I once only dreamed of owning. Ethan worked quietly behind the scenes, finally understanding what real work meant. One evening, Dad called me. His voice was soft. "Your mother and I are proud of you, Nora." I felt my eyes sting. Then he said something that surprised me. "Ethan told us you're better at this business than he ever was." I sat on the edge of my bed, stunned. My brother, the same man who mocked me since childhood, had told them that himself. Later that week, Ethan came into my office with a file. Before he left, he said, "You built something real. Something strong." I never did. I nodded. "Thank you," I said. He smiled, just a small, gentle smile. It was the first true one I'd seen from him in years. And for once, it didn't feel like a win over him, just a truth we finally shared. The night of the Entrepreneur of the Year awards felt unreal. I wore a long black dress and stood under the bright lights while cameras flashed. They called my name, and I walked onto the stage with steady steps. I saw Mom and Dad smiling from the front row. Ethan sat beside them, clapping quietly, not with pride for himself, but for me. When I held the trophy, I felt the weight of every year he mocked me. Every tear. Every quiet night, building plans no one believed in. I took a breath and spoke into the microphone. "This award is for every underdog who was laughed at," I said. "Every person told they were too small. Keep building in silence. Let your work speak when the time is right." People applauded. Some stood. I felt a rush of warmth, not pride, but peace. When I stepped off the stage, Ethan walked to me, slowly. "Congratulations," he said. "You earned all of it." And for the first time, I believed him. After the awards ceremony, I stood outside under the soft night lights. People were taking photos and congratulating each other. Ethan approached me slowly, hands in his pockets, his shoulders no longer pushed back with pride. "Thank you," he said quietly. I frowned. "For what?" He took a breath. "For not destroying me completely. You could have taken everything, and you didn't." His voice held no anger, just truth. I looked at him, really looked. He wasn't the same brother who once mocked every step I took. His face showed the weight of lessons learned. "Destruction never teaches," I said softly. "Humility does." He nodded, eyes wet but steady. "I'm learning," he whispered. "I'm trying." I placed a hand on his arm. "Good. Keep going. Don't stop now." For a moment, we stood there quietly, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as siblings who finally understood the damage pride can cause. The city lights shimmered around us like tiny stars. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the sharp anger inside me loosen and drift away like smoke. A few weeks later, Mom and Dad invited us for dinner. This time there was no tension, no bragging, no hidden shame. We sat at the table together like a real family. Mom hugged me tighter than usual. Dad kept smiling at me like he still couldn't believe everything that had happened. Ethan passed me the bread and said, "Nora should sit at the head of the table tonight." Mom laughed, but her eyes were proud. Dad said, "She has restored our family's name with grace." I blushed. I only did what I needed to do. Ethan shook his head. "No. You taught us what strength looks like." Hearing him say that felt like a warm wave washing over old wounds. After dinner, we sat in the living room sharing stories. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like the forgotten one. I felt seen. And as my parents talked about their hopes for the future, I realized something. Revenge had given me justice. But forgiveness, that gave me peace. With Havenstone growing, I felt called to something bigger. I remembered what it felt like to be the quiet girl in the corner, overlooked and dismissed. I didn't want other girls with talent to feel that same pain. So I started a mentorship program for young women in finance. I named it the Clark Initiative. It focused on analytics, real estate basics, and building confidence. The day we launched, A line of young women stretched outside the new office. Some carried notebooks like mine. Some carried hope in their eyes. I stood at the door greeting them one by one. "Welcome," I said. "You belong here." News outlets shared the story. People online called it inspiring. My email filled with messages from girls who wanted to learn how to build quietly, like I had. And as I stood in a room filled with eager faces, I felt something powerful. This was bigger than revenge. This was legacy. This was change. This was planting seeds for women who would grow stronger than even I imagined. And nothing felt better. One cool morning, I sat in my car in front of the old house Ethan and I grew up in. The white paint was peeling. The porch steps leaned. But the memories were loud. Dad fixing the fence, Mom planting flowers, Ethan running in the yard, me reading on the steps. He always said, "One day this house will be mine." It wasn't said kindly, more like a promise he'd take everything first. I smiled softly. With one signature, I bought the house outright. Then I surprised my parents by handing them the keys. Mom pressed her hands to her mouth. Dad looked like he might cry. "It's yours," I told them. "You took care of us. Now I take care of you." They hugged me tightly, thanking me again and again. Ethan stood beside us silently. Finally he whispered, "I always wanted it, but you're the one who deserved it." I touched his arm. "We build different things, Ethan." And for once, he didn't argue. He simply nodded, humbled and grateful. That night I stood on a tall balcony overlooking the city, my city now. Lights sparkled below. Streets moved like rivers of gold. I held my notebook, the same one where I once wrote shaky words like plan, learn, rebuild. I flipped to the last page and wrote the final line. My brother laughed at my small dreams. He forgot roots grow underground first. Now I own the ground he stands on. I closed the book and placed it on the railing. The wind brushed my face softly, like the world itself was nodding at me. My journey had begun in pain. It had risen through silence. It had ended in strength. Not just the strength of revenge, but the strength of becoming who I always was inside. I whispered into the night, "I made it." And for the first time in my life, the city whispered back, quiet, warm, and proud. If you love this story, make sure you hit subscribe for more true revenge stories.